Mr.Ziya Us Salam is a prolific author and a columnist with experience of more than 24 years. Currently affiliated with Frontline, the Hindu group, the Delhi-based author has contributed the books covering the diverse titles from cinematic history to the mainstream socio-political issues of Indian politics. In an interactive talk with me, he shared the glimpses of his journey from a childhood days to a noted literary and social commentator. The book Houseful reviews the days of the cinema in 1970s. Delhi Four Shows is a book that talk about the talkies of a yesteryears in Delhi. Talaq Till Do Us Apart is a book that break the myths surrounded the triple talaq of Muslim women. Of Saffron Flag and the Skull Cap is a book that talk about the crisis and the struggle of the identities of minorities and marginalized. Lynch File is a book that explore the stories of the victims of hate crime. Both of these books, Lynch File and of Saffron Flag and Skullcaps, were published by Sage. So I am standing with Mr. Ziya, one of the prolific author who has written recently two of the major books. One on the triple talaq, Till Talaq Do Us Part. Till Talaq Do Us Part. Do Us Part, and second one is Lynch Files. So Lynch Files is one of the book that he really talk about one of the things that happens in the changing Indian politics. And here just a few questions with Mr. Ziya. Mr. Ziya, can you please told us a little bit about your background and your connection with Delhi and your connection with Rampur, a little bit going behind, and then we will talk about on your books.
Okay. See, I work with the Hindu newspaper, with the Hindu group as an associate editor. I've been there for almost 19 years now. Before that, I worked with the Times of India, Nation in the World, The Statesman, and also The Pioneer in different capacities, but most of them were for a brief while each. And I have in the past been a literary and film critic and a features editor of the newspaper.
Okay.
Now I write largely on socio-cultural and political.
So that's very interesting, and just little bit
and
behind.
Though you call me a Rampur guy, yes, I
definitely.
am from Rampur. My roots go back to Rampur. My parents were from Rampur in UP. My father was a mufti over there, and my mother was a housewife. But I've been born and brought up in Delhi.
So can we go back, a son of a mufti who is living in a Lajpat Nagar, and Mufti Abdul Daim, one of the famous muftis of his time or the Islamic jurist of his time, who has penned down many books and translated many of the hadiths as we know about him. And in these circumstances, you are living in a Lajpat Nagar, that's a mixed society, or we can say like a Hindu majority society, and you are studying in a convent school.
I didn't study in a convent school.
Or it's a public school?
Large part. Till 10th I was in a public school, which was Bluewells International in New Delhi's Kailash.
One of the prominent names in
and
Delhi.
in 11th, 12th I was definitely in a convent, which was Somerville. It was called Abner Memorial at that time. And I guess I was destined to be a journalist or a writer because right from my childhood I had a fascination for the written word. When I was in 5th standard or so, I used to write down a newspaper myself in that immature state. I would read a newspaper and then pen down news on my own. Also, I would add a few advertisements and make a photostat of those 4-8 pages, which I would do and circulate it in my colony. I guess I had my first byline when I was in 7th standard.
That's a great achievement. So son of a mufti and went to St. Stephen's or Stephenian.
See, my father never stopped me from pursuing education, and for him education was not about pursuing knowledge only of Islam.
So here I can say that this is one of the sample that stereotyping is there in our society. That's not a real case. That's not a real case. Yes.
But my father never stopped me or my sister from studying in a co-ed, from studying in a public education, a public school. My sister is a doctor. So that has never been.
So we can say this is one face of Islamic scholars which people don't know.
When we talk of the Quran, the Quran says, Rabbi Zidni ilma. It doesn't ask us to pursue only Islamic knowledge. It asks us to pursue knowledge. That means all knowledge which is beneficial to mankind, you must pursue that. In Islam, there is no division of the so-called secular and theological learning. If it had been the case, then we would not have produced the greatest of scientists and astronomers and mathematicians in the centuries
in the medieval era when the Islamic sciences
in the medieval era gone by. It's only in the modern times after the coming of the British that there has been a division of knowledge in India between theological, either you'll go to a madrasa or you'll go to a school. One way you'll attain knowledge about Islam, the other way only about the secular world. Whereas the Quran is a living document for every aspect of life. It does not ask us to stay confined to a madrasa or a masjid. Islam is a living experience which has to be performed, which has to be understood 24/7.
So, in 1971, you left St. Stephen's.
Not 71, 91.
1991,
Yeah.
you left St. Stephen's, and then after 1991, you went to for the.
I had done my post-graduation from Delhi University in tourism. Okay, I haven't done journalism. I did enroll for journalism at MCRC Jamia and at Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. But I left both the places because at that time I found them too inclined towards the theoretical part of the profession. And since I was already writing by then, I was doing a lot of freelance work for Indian Express. I had even had some edits and op-eds published. So I thought,
So,
okay,
when the formal career of journalism, in which year was it started?
That's a difficult one because when I was in college, I was constantly writing for this.
So it was
magazine,
a
that
constant
magazine.
journey from your
It was just
undergraduation days.
basically a continuation. But yes, if you want to know, first job I picked up in journalism, that was in '95.
So from 95 onward, I can say, and I'm not counting the number of years, it's a long journey of
Yeah,
journalism
it's
that you
24.
have been past more than 24 years or 24 years from Hindu, Indian Express and different notable
Yeah.
news companies or news agencies of India. So now little bit coming up your writing career or related to the authorship of the books. So when it was started, where was you write the first book?
That again is difficult. My first book, see, I had done a few anthologies in the past. Wherein I had contributed an essay or two or a couple of chapters to some books. Okay, but my first independent book, so to say, I had signed way back some 15 years ago. That was about the golden age of Hindi cinema. And I had a couple of co-authors there, but it was largely my book, and it is called Houseful, The Golden Age of Hindi Cinema. It was released in October 2012.
So what was about the
It was about Nehruvian socialism and how it impacted cinema at that time.
That was again an interesting topic. We can say that's quite different, and it's
Yeah.
related to culture, entertainment, and socialism, all connecting together three strings.
It was like that. And then my next book, which is completely independent, came in 2015, and that was about, it was called Delhi Four Shows.
Delhi Four Shows.
Yeah.
So what was about Delhi Four Shows?
Delhi Four Shows was about the history of cinemas of Delhi.
Oh, really?
People normally talk, when they talk of films, they talk of history of either certain directors or heroes or that kind of thing. This was probably, so far, the only attempt to come up with the history of cinema through the cinema halls. And that was meant to basically be a signing of letter for this single screen halls, which are all but gone from metropolitan India.
So from then two different topics you choose.
No,
here.
I've done plenty of other things along the
Okay.
way. I have been a features editor of The Hindu for 16 long years, and I've been a literary and cinema critic at the same time, and then I shifted to Frontline, where I was an associate editor. I'm still working there. And then I did my book, Till Talaq Do Us Part, which came in the summer of 2000. I did a book called Till Talaq Do Us Part, which has been translated into 3 languages already and will be translated into 5 languages by the end of the year, inshallah. It was released in May last year. It was not about triple talaq as it is erroneously believed. It was about the 8 forms of divorce available to a Muslim man or a woman in marriage.
That's the empowerment that gave from the Islam to the females. We can
like
say
the Quran empowers a woman through khula,
Yeah.
a woman's right to single inalienable divorce.
So we can say in the other word, it's
In
break
our
the
society-
stereotypes that
in
that
our
is created
society
in our
and
society.
because of our ignorance and the ignorance of the so-called television Maulanas. The average man thinks that the Muslim woman has no right to divorce, which is a whole lot of rubbish. And there is also called something called Mubarak, divorce by mutual consent. And also in talaq, there is nothing called instant triple talaq in the Quran. You read Surah Baqarah, which with verses 226 to 237, which deal with the forms of divorce, and also the opening verses of Surah Talaq. It clearly outlines a process of divorce wherein 3 menstrual cycles are involved. Only then is a divorce completed. But here in India and Pakistan and large parts of Bangladesh too, you find that instant triple talaq is accepted by many of the clerics, which is against the letter or the spirit of the Quran. So I did a book on those lines, but it was not about triple talaq, as I would repeat. Then I did a book which again, alhamdulillah, is doing reasonably well in the market, of saffron flags and skull caps.
Yeah, I saw that. Some of the reviews I have read
that
about
came
that.
in July last year, and the title is self-explanatory.
Yes.
I tried to explore the genesis of Hindutva, which is removed from Hinduism, or as much removed from Hinduism as ISIS is from Islam.
Yes.
And then talked of the churning within the Muslim community at this time when we are facing existential crisis. So that book, it's a Hindi version, will be out in the market by 17th or 18th of April.
18th of April.
Yeah, this month.
And then your next book is about the Lynch
Then
Files.
I did my next book, which was released in February this year, Lynch Files.
Lynch Files.
Again, the title is self-explanatory, brought out by Sage, and I have documented all the lynching instances, or most of the lynching instances, which have taken place since Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister in 2014.
I have not read the book, but read the plenty of the reviews. It seems to appear like a social research or like a qualitative study that you
basically,
presented.
I spoke to the family members of the victims and their advocates, and also consulted all the some of the newspapers and magazines.
So it's a sort of the interviews you conducted, or sort of the
And also
exploration.
trace the history of the whole incident. In modern India, we are taught that cow is a sacred animal. I believe cow is a political animal. If you go back to the scriptures of Hinduism, you go back to the Vedas and the Upanishads, cow is not called a sacred animal. In fact, cow sacrifice, cattle sacrifice used to take place during Vedic civilization. Hindu gods like Agni, Brahma, Usha, Maros, they were propitiated with sacrifice of cattle. And in ancient India, it was considered a thing of honor that when you had a really important guest, you served beef to him. And when you had an ordinary guest whom you didn't really regard too highly, then you served him either vegetarian fare or you served him chicken or something like that.
So it's not a matter
for
of
an important guest, mutton, beef was the way forward. Some or the other, in modern day times, our countrymen have forgotten the teachings of the Vedas, and they have become an easy tool in the hands of politicians who use the masses for their ulterior motives.
So here you can say that this is more like a political tool where the mobs are using for their own
and
purpose.
lynching is a political exercise. It has nothing to do with Hinduism.
Definitely.
Okay, because the people who lynch are not Hindus.
And
They are
sometimes
goons, basically. Okay, and they do not lynch from the point of view of killing the man immediately. They are trained to inflict maximum torture on the victim.
And sometimes you think that the local influences and the regional influences, regional rivalries also taking place in this issue rather than the larger issue is
Not
also
necessarily, not necessarily, because these people are trained to inflict maximum torture on the victim.
and
rather
creating
than
an atmosphere
killing him
and
instantly.
environment of a fear in the surrounding.
Rather than killing him instantly. That is why if you see the chapter on akhlaq, the kind of brutality that unfortunate man had to go through, with his face skin being peeled off, his ears being lopped off, his lip being chopped off, his ribs being broken. That was not the work of a cow lover.
Definitely.
That was work of a barbarian.
Definitely.
And similar have been the cases of Pehlu Khan and others. Wherever the men have been killed, they have been either Muslims or Dalits. The idea is to reinforce the age-old Brahminical caste
The social
hierarchy.
class itself, it's a sort of
Brahminical hierarchy, under which there is supposed to exist only to serve the upper caste,
And the same-
and Muslims and Christians are
Also
supposed
fell
to
in the same
exist
category.
only at the sweet will of the majority community.
So great, Mr. Ziya, for your time, and
Thank
many,
you.
many thanks. And I could not have ever imagined that we could meet like this.
It's
and
very
we
nice
can
of you
have
to
this.
come over.
Really, that's a great